This is a story from my dad. It's called Snow White and Rose Red. A poor widow once lived in a little cottage. In front of the cottage was a garden in which were growing two rose trees. One bore white roses and the other red roses. She had two children who were very similar to the rose trees. One was called Snow White and the other Rose Red, and they were as loving, caring, busy, and untiring as any two children in the world were. Snow White was more gentle and quieter than her sister, and liked skipping about the fields, seeking flowers, and catching summer birds. And Snow White stayed at home with her mother, either helping her in her work, or when that was done, reading out loud to her. The two children had a great affection for one another. They were always seen hand in hand, and Snow White would say to her sister, "We will never separate." Rose Red would reply, "No, never, as long as we live." And the mother added, "That which one has, let her always share with the other." They always ran together in the woods, collecting ripe berries, and not a single animal would injure them. They all felt the greatest esteem for the young girls. The hare came and ate parsley from their hands, deer grazed by their side, and stag bounded past them unheeding. The birds did not stir from the bough, but sang in entire security in their presence. No mischance befell them. If they were in the woods and found that the sun had gone down, they lay down on the moss to repose and sleep until the morning, and their mother was satisfied for their safety and felt no fear about them. Snow White and Rose Red kept their mother's cottage so clean that it gave pleasure just to look in. In the summer time, Rose Red attended to the house, and every morning before her mother awoke, she put a bouquet which had roses from each of the rose trees outside, next to her bed. In winter time, Snow White set to light the fire and put on the kettle after polishing it until it was like gold for brightness. And when the snow was falling, her mother would bid her to bolt the door, and then sitting by the hearth, the good widow would read aloud to them from a big book, while the little girls sat and span on their spinning wheels. Close by them lay a lamb and a white pigeon with its head tucked under its wing on a perch. One evening, while they were all sitting cozily together like this, there was a knock at the door, as if someone wished to come in. "Make haste, Rose Red," said her mother. "Open the door. It is surely some poor traveler making shelter." Rose Red accordingly pulled back the bolt, expecting to see a poor man, but it was nothing of the kind. It was a black bear that thrust his huge head in at the open door. Rose Red cried out and sprang back. The lamb bleated, the dove fluttered on her perch, and Snow White ran and hid behind her mother's bed. The bear began speaking and said, "Do not be afraid. I will not do you any harm. I am half frozen and would like to warm myself a little at your fire." "The poor bear," the mother replied. "Come in and lie by the fire, and be careful that your hair is not burned." Then she called to Snow White and Rose Red, telling them the bear was kind and would not harm them. They came as she bade them, and presently the lamb and the dove also drew near without fear. "Children," begged the bear, "knock some of the snow out of my coat." So they brought out the broom and swept the bear's coat quite clean, and after that he stretched himself out in front of the fire and pleased himself by growling a little, only to show he was happy and comfortable. Before long they were all quite good friends, and the children began to play with their visitor, pulling at his thick fur, or placing their feet upon his back and rolling over and over. The bear permitted them to amuse themselves, only occasionally calling out when they went a little too far, "Children, spare me an inch of life." When it was night, and all were making ready to go to bed, the widow told the bear, "You may stay here and lie by the hearth if you like, so that you'll be sheltered from the cold and the bad weather." The offer was accepted, and when morning came and day broke in the east, the two children let him out, and he trod over the snow back into the forest. After this, every evening at the same time, the bear came, laid by the fire, and allowed the children to play with him, and they soon became quite fond of their playmate, and the door was never bolted in the evening until he had once again appeared. Eventually springtime came, and all around was green and bright, with flowers budding and birds twittering, and the bear said to Snow White one morning, "Now I must leave you, and all summer I shall not be able to come back." "Where are you going, dear bear?" asked Snow White. "I have to go into the woods to protect my treasure from the bad dwarfs. In winter time, when the earth is frozen hard, they must remain underground and cannot break through. But now the sunshine has thawed the earth, and they can come to the surface, and whatever gets into their hands or is brought into their cave seldom, if ever, sees the daylight again." Snow White was very sad, and said good-bye to the good-natured beast, and unfastened the door that he might go. But while going out he caught by a hook on the lintel, and a scrap of his fur was torn. Snow White thought there was something shining like gold through the fur, but he went out to the trees so quickly she could not feel certain what it was, and he was soon hidden amongst the trees. One day the mother sent her children into the wood to pick up sticks. They found a big tree lying on the ground that had been felled, and towards the roots they noticed something skipping and springing, jumping back and forth like a dog tied to a rope, and they could not make out, as it was sometimes hidden in the grass. And they came nearer, they could see it was a dwarf, with a shriveled up face and a snow-white beard and long ears. The beard was fixed in a gash in the tree trunk, and the tiny fellow was hopping around to and fro, but he could not manage to free himself. He stared at the children with red, fiery eyes and shouted, "Why are you standing there? Can't you come and try to help me?" "What are you doing, little fellow?" inquired Rose Red. "You stupid, inquisitive goose," shouted the dwarf. "I meant to split the trunk so I could chop it up for kitchen sticks. The big logs burn up the small quantity of food we cook, for people like us do not consume great heaps of food as you heavy, greedy folk do." The hook I had driven in and was soon, oh my goodness, the bill hook I had driven in, and soon I should have done what I required, but the stupid tool sprang from the cleft, which was so quickly shut up again that it caught my handsome white beard. And here I must stop, for I cannot set myself free, and you stupid pale-faced creatures, you're laughing, aren't you? In spite of the dwarf's bad temper, the girl took all possible pains to release the little man, but without avail, for the beard could not be removed, it was wedged too tightly into the wood. "I'll run and get some one," said Rose Red. "Idiot!" cried the dwarf. "Who would go and get more people? There are too many. Can't you think of something better?" "Oh, don't be so impatient," said Snow White. "Let me think." She clapped her hands as if she had discovered a remedy, and took out her pocket scissors, and in a moment had set the dwarf free by cutting off the end of his beard. Immediately the dwarf felt that he was free. He seized a sack full of gold that was hidden amongst the tree roots, and lifted it up, grumbling, "Clumsy creatures, to cut off a bit of my beautiful beard of which I am so proud. Bad luck to both of you." Saying this, he swung the sack across his shoulders and went off without even casting a glance at them. Not many days after, the two children went to the angle in the brook, meaning to catch a dish of fish for dinner. As they were drawing near the water, they perceived something looking like a big grasshopper springing towards the stream as it were going to jump in. They hurried to see what it might be, and found it was the dwarf again. "Where are you going?" said Rose Red. "Surely you don't want to go into the water." "I'm not a simpleton," yelled the little man. "Don't you see the wretch of a fish is pulling me in?" The dwarf had been sitting angling from the side of the stream, when, by ill luck, the wind had tangled his beard in his fishing line, and just then a big fish took the bait. The unamiable little fellow was not sufficient in strength to pull it out, and the fish had the advantage and was dragging the dwarf after it. Certainly he caught at every stalk and spray near him, but that did not assist him greatly. He was forced to follow all the twistings of the fish, and perpetually in danger of being pulled right into the water. The girls arrived just in time. They caught hold of him firmly and endeavored to untwist the beard from the line, but all in vain. It was too tightly entangled, and there was nothing left but again to make use of the scissors. So they were taken out, and the tangled portion was snipped off. The dwarf noticed what they were doing. He exclaimed in a great rage, "Is this how you damage my beard? Not content with making it shorter before, you're making it still smaller and completely spoiling it. I can't dare show my face around my people. I wish you had missed your way before you took this road." Then he fetched a sack of pearls that lay among the rushes, and not saying another word, he hobbled off and disappeared behind a large stone. Soon after this, it chanced that the poor widow sent her children to town to purchase cotton, needles, and ribbons and laces. The way they went to town ran over a common, which was in every direction large masses of rocks. The children's attention was soon attracted to a big bird that hovered in the air like a kite. They noticed that, after circling slowly for a time, and gradually getting nearer to the ground, it pounced down amongst a mass of rocks, and a heart-rending cry reached their ears, and they ran quickly to the place they just saw it go, and with horror saw the eagle had seized their former dwarf acquaintance, and was just about to carry him off. The children did not hesitate for a moment. They took a firm hold of the little man, and pulled so stoutly with the eagle for possession of his contemplated prey, that after much rough treatment on both sides, the dwarf was left in the hand of the brave little girls, and the eagle took flight. As soon as the little man had some measure recovered from the alarm, his small squeaky voice cracked, and he shouted, "You couldn't have been more gentle. Look at my coat. You've torn it, and it's full of holes. And such a fine manner it was before. You clumsy officious things have ruined it." Then he picked up a sack of jewels and slipped out of sight behind a piece of rock, without saying thank you. The girls by this time were quite used to his ungrateful ways, so they took no notice of it, and went on their way to make their purchases in the town, and were ready to return to their happy home. On the way back, they saw a fat— oh my goodness, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. On their way back, suddenly, once more they ran across their dwarf friend. Upon a clear space he had turned out his sack of jewels, and was counting and admiring them, for he had not imagined anybody would be so late coming across the common. The sun, setting, was shining upon the brilliant stones, and their changing hues and sparkling rays caused the children to pause and admire their glittering brightness. "What are you staring at?" cried the dwarf, at the same time becoming red with rage, for he feared his jewels would be taken from him. "And what are you standing there making ugly faces?" It's probable that he might have proceeded in the same manner, but there was suddenly a great growl heard near them, and a big black bear ran out from the woods. Up jumped the dwarf in an extreme terror, and he could not get to his hiding place, for the bear was too close, and he cried out in a very evident anguish, "Oh, dear Mr. Bear, please forgive me, I pray. I will render to you all my treasure. See these precious stones lying there. Grant me my life. What would you want with such an insignificant and slender little fellow? You wouldn't notice me between your teeth. See, though, those two girls, fat as young quails, and they would be a delicate morsel for your stomach. I beg of you, take them, good Mr. Bear, and let me go." But the bear was not moved by his speeches. He gave the dwarf a blow with his paw, and he lay lifeless on the ground. Meanwhile the maidens were running away, making off for home, but all of a sudden they were stopped by a well-known voice that called out, "Snow White, Rose Red, stay and wait for me. Do not fear. I am your bear friend." The bear came towards them, and as he reached his side, suddenly the bear skin on him slipped off onto the ground, and before them was a handsome man, garmented in gold, who said, "I am a king's son, who was enchanted by the wicked dwarf over there. He stole my treasure, and compelled me to roam the woods as a giant bear, until his death would set me free. Therefore he has received a well-deserved punishment." Some time after, Snow White married the prince, and they shared between them the enormous treasures which the dwarf had collected in his cave. They moved into the castle, and the old mother spent many happy years with her children. And in the garden she grew 2 flowers of trees, with white roses and red roses. And that is the end of Snow White and Rose Red.